My background is from rural Ohio. My father was a sculptor. My mother was a painter and a printmaker. And we grew up on, 18 acres of incredible rolling hills in Ohio. We had lakes and waterfalls and forests and a tremendous amount of nature.
Wow.
And then combining that with their focus on art, you had this kind of beautiful, bucolic, um, kind of almost my father and mother had converted an old cow barn into their studios. So it was kind of ag combined with art.
Hmm.
Um, but it was a wonderful, I have two older sisters as well. So we were surrounded by art, and I rejected all of it and focused on sports. Um,
Hmm.
and it was kind of an accident that I fell into architecture.
And your father was an industrial designer, right? Did
Correct.
he work
Originally,
on?
he started out professionally as an industrial designer, working for Peter Mullermonk,
Hmm.
in Pittsburgh, and then found his love of sculpture, soon thereafter.
It's amazing. What kind of industrial design did he work on or do? Was it a specific product type or?
Actually, interestingly enough, it's kind of shocking. He passed away, and I was going through his portfolio, and it was a combination of literally like product shavers, new kitchens,
Cool.
but it was also surprisingly environmental, and meaning space design as well, which I hadn't realized growing up. I'd always assumed it was more product related. Um, so yeah, it's in the blood.
I guess so.
Did you understand or get to know the work, the artistic work that your parents were doing, or were you just kind of like seeing it from afar in some ways?
Interesting question, because I remember asking my mom, why do my father's sculptures all seem to revolve around this forged and bent steel with concrete, and they're all very organic. Like he could do anything. He's a sculptor, he could do anything.
Mm-hmm.
And my mom said, this is years in. She said, he's still working on an idea,
Wow.
you know,
Wow.
20 years in, 30 years in, which I thought was fascinating. The idea of honing an idea in a language, whether it's architecture or design. Yeah.
That's fascinating. And I do feel like that's very much a perspective that a maybe like a true artist or true creative would have. Like all the project, and then let's get to architecture, which we'll talk about. But through architecture projects, every project's different to a degree. But I feel like from an internal perspective, there's sometimes questions, problems, things that a person is always wrestling with from one project to the next, as like the overarching, I don't know, thesis or just whatever it is that's pulling you toward certain things.
Well, it's interesting because my partner and I actually debate about this a lot, because I feel like every project um, brings with it completely new constraints.
Mm.
And it's like opening a new book for the first time, and you're just slowly extracting each individual um, constraint that relates to that client, that site. And so the process should be completely unique,
Hmm.
and the product should be completely unique.
Mm-hmm.
And my partner is a little more like, I think my father, where he does have a certain set of ideas that he's working on still,
Yeah.
and he's
Mm.
constantly honing. Whereas I feel like a bit more, you know, a more of an open book is about what the result, the form, the system could end up being.
Mm. And I'm very curious to know more about that partnership. I mean, I would assume it's kind of nice to have that dynamic, so it's not all kind of one sided. Um,
Yes.
but so when you're growing up, you rejected into the arts because you're into sports. What kind of sports?
Primarily baseball, though. Yeah. It was baseball, basketball, football, but it was primarily baseball. Yeah, I was going to be the next Johnny Bench,
The next
Oh.
Johnny Pitch.
and
Very important.
this arm, which I just had my rotator cuff repaired,
Oh,
it
that's
was
right.
not a Johnny Bench arm.
Were
Wait,
you
so
like a pitcher?
Catcher.
Oh,
Catcher.
it's a tough spot.
Oh. I tried to play baseball once because, I'm not from this country. So to me, baseball is a completely new thing. It's a lot of work, man.
Let me expand on that. It was a family kind of affair with my family. We played baseball with 5 people total.
Oh, fantastic.
So it wasn't, there's not normally that much running around.
Oh, okay.
But you have more people on the field, to be fair.
You had more than I did.
Yeah.
I had my neighbor.
So how did you manage to escape the arts if you were like kind of immersed into that world?
It's interesting. I remember there was a sociology class in 6th grade, and to my horror, there's a statistic that like some 85% of all human beings follow their parents in whatever profession, trade, craft that they are involved in. And being, an athlete not wanting to pursue the arts, I found this was just devastating news. And but it turns out that there was an opportunity my junior year in high school to select an elective. And I was not a big fan of school to begin with. Academics weren't mine. I was in all the honors classes, but I didn't love it. And I remember asking my older sister, how do I pick a class if I don't even like going to school?
Yeah.
And she mentioned, and she was a stellar artist, and she said, well, some of my friends also take this drafting class who are in my art class, and you might try it. And I tried it, and it was, okay. And then followed to the next year. It was an architecture class, and I took it, and it was okay. And so I kind of fell into it as a default major in college, and absolutely got sucked in completely 100%. And within 2 weeks, my passion for baseball pivoted to architecture. So it was a pretty sudden, brakes slammed, pivot, and move forward. Because we were doing all-nighters the very first day of university.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah, I was going to ask, what was the thing that was so alluring to you? It sounds like you dove into studio. So was it the atmosphere, the camaraderie, the making? It was making.
I mean, again, my roommates were like architects on cocaine. I mean, not literally. But they were driven from a very young age to be architects.
Yeah.
Huh.
And I was kind of riding off their energy and just got sucked in, and then it just took off completely. And I mean, I feel so blessed to have found this medium that feeds me every day, every night, all the time, 24/7. It really is an amazing practice.
So were your parents like, yes, we finally got him back into the arts, or?
No, they could have cared less. No, they just wanted me to be happy. Yeah. They never, ever put pressure on me to do anything academically, musically, athletically. They just supported me in whatever I was interested in.
That's great.
And the University of Cincinnati, if I'm not mistaken, is a pretty reputable school for architecture. It's not an easy program. No,
at this point, every single person who goes into it has to be a valedictorian. It's quite competitive. And I see that as a positive and a negative. Mm-hmm. I think it eliminates a lot of really creative minds that I probably couldn't even get in today because of the rigor. But the amazing quality is it has a co-op program, which allows you to travel the entire country, the entire world, and intern in various scale studios and offices. And I got exposed to the world and the world of travel, which taught me an immense amount. And so our family is now kind of addicted to travel as well, which is, I think, really healthy for all people.
Yeah.
I encourage it with every youth.
And that program, was the traveling happening specifically during 4th year, which is kind of common? Or was it more scattered throughout? And
it's actually, at that point, it was a 6-year program. So every other quarter you were traveling.
Oh, wow.
And working in another city. And then they also allowed you to take travel quarters, which is just pure research and travel. And I traveled all over Europe. and documented all the modern masters, and it was amazing, incredible pedagogy.
Interesting. So is that 6 years for a B-Arch?
Yeah, it's a professional
Program or
yeah.
accredited and
That's
whatnot.
really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, they've changed it now. I think they still now, or they've changed it to a split between 4 and 2 for undergraduate and masters.
That's really interesting. I've not heard of a program that had traveling and I guess interning and being in different places as that much. I mean, that's super integrated.
Yeah, completely.
So what was the school experience like? I mean, you mentioned going to different places and interning and things like this. Was there, I don't know what my question is. I guess one way to phrase it is, was there any surprises about architecture school as you were going through it, or things that maybe you had some kind of preconception as to what architecture would be about, and then school kind of showed you a different way of understanding it?
I had very little preconceptions going in. I mean, it was all very, very new. And it's an interesting thing that I've spoken about. I mean, we have 26 people in our designers in our studio at this point, and we have like rock stars all the way through. And I've asked them how they found architecture, or how architecture found them. And you would be shocked how random each and every one was. I mean, I would say there's a handful who knew at a young age, but it is completely circumstantial and random that they've ended up in architecture. They would have excelled in any field, given the remarkable talent we have in our studio. But what it tells me is the decision at the age of 17 or 18 to choose your profession is kind of crazy.
Yeah.
You're not mature enough to do it. And so when you're walking in with 80 other students into freshman year into an architecture program, most of them don't know anything about what they're getting into. And they quickly weed out, the people who aren't as motivated. But I think the surprise is is when I think back on, because it was all just new. It was all exciting and new, and you're just absorbing immense amount of information. But I would say the challenge with architecture school is there's so much to learn in the field that you can't actually cram it into 4 years or even 6 years and feel like you've adequately produced a student. This is my perspective.
Sure.
That is really grounded in what is needed in the architectural profession. So what they don't tell you is so much of the learning happens after school.
Yeah.
After you get out. And I'm not even talking about the technical side. I'm talking about true design and what design is about, true collaboration and what collaboration is about. Understanding to work with clients meaningfully, understanding how to run a business, understanding how to collaborate with engineers and makers. That all is like 90%. You're learning like 10% when you come out of school. It's just a brief exposure. And that's why, you'll find statistically so many students coming out of architecture school don't actually end up practicing architecture because they learn more about it.
Yeah, those are some really, really good points. The low percentage of people continue with the architecture, I think it's also because the profession it's not an easy one. It takes a lot of commitment, hours. There's oftentimes the feeling amongst some architects that they aren't getting the respect that they feel they deserve. The list probably goes on. I
think it's about patience too. Just giving, having the patience and giving it time to give back to you. It's not going to give back to you the next, the first few years. You might have to wait 20 years before something actually happens.
You're absolutely right. You could not have articulated that more profoundly. It is a profession of patience. And the reality is buildings take 3 to 10 years to build. And so a lot of people don't have the patience to see through one after another, and have a couple of them not even get built. Many of them not even get built. So you really do have to be tremendously passionate to keep going through. And we feel lucky. I mean, at this point, the depth and breadth of the work we get to do is remarkable as far as the clients coming in. So very blessed.
Oh yeah, for sure. You guys are on fire. You guys are doing super well. It's very exciting.
I'm surprised you're taking some time off right now.
It is a Friday afternoon on a holiday.
It is Friday.
So.
Yeah.
You need to take a little break every now and then.
But it's a good point also of, not all the projects work out. And we were speaking with architects and an architect recently, and a couple of them had said two different things. One is, he was like, this project, which has gotten all these awards and done very well, that took 12 years to do. He said, you take that project plus another one, that's half of my career. That's nearly half of my life, in fact. He's like 65, Like, that's an interesting perspective. Another one says...
That is exactly true.
You say, you'd be surprised how many projects that we've done work for, we've got the contract, and how many don't get built. He said, it was like in our office, there's certain employees who I know, and just because of basically bad luck, like none of their projects have gotten built the last 8 years because of just, they happen to be on that project, and that's what happened.
You're speaking absolute truth. Yes. I say yes to everything you just said. Unfortunately, so you have to love the process. You really have to be passionate about the process. And you have to love the people you're working with. Creating a studio environment where you're respected and your ideas are being utilized daily. That's so important.
Is that, jumping forward to the office, is that something that is difficult to cultivate from a firm leader's perspective? Because you guys are 26 people, you said?
Yeah.
But still, 26 is a good number, and it's easy for people to kind of feel like they've fallen into the cracks, so to speak.
We have a very unique studio in that our goal is that every single person within the first 3 years of their tenure is both leading a project and assisting on projects, regardless of their experience. And the theory is that as a job captain, when you have a team of 4 or 5 on your project team, and all of them know how to lead projects, it's like jet fuel for the whole team, because the whole goal is to get everyone thinking 5 steps ahead. And if you get this kind of web of people thinking 5 steps ahead, nothing gets lost in the cracks, and they know what you need, and they know what their neighbor needs to get done. And that we've thrived on that kind of pedagogy within the studio. Is somebody with 25 years of experience is helping someone with 3 years of experience, whether it's drafting or coaching or making models. It's a completely democratic studio in that sense. And I think that's what keeps people in the studio. We have tremendous tenure in our studio.
Is that something that you guys came up with because of previous places you worked at, and the kind of like hierarchical level of management, and just experiencing the inefficiencies of that kind of model?
Exactly. Yes. Dave and I came from different scale studios or firms. And we realized that people can kind of die on the vine, if they're not really creatively being challenged. And so our goal is to challenge everyone in the studio constantly and give them a lot of responsibility to the point of like breaking. But they have a team around them. They have a family of studio members around them to take care of each other. One of the jokes in our studio is never take a deadline unless you know why. In other words, it's not uncommon in studios for the heads to say, you have a deadline on this day, I want this done. Go. We co-author our deadlines as a whole team. Everyone knows the why. They know the budget. They know everything about the project. So we're training people to be self-sufficient in a way. And when you have a wide group of people who are all capable of leading, it just makes the running so much easier.
It makes total sense. What you're saying makes complete and total sense. Is there ever concern that some folks might go through this kind of 3-year program or be at your office for a certain period of time and say, I've gotten what I need to learn. I'm going to get out and do my own thing. Thanks for the tips.
Yeah, no, we have. One of the things we pride ourselves on is we have probably 9 firms that we've birthed.
Wow.
In our tenure, and we nurture them. We pass work along to them. We find that we take great pride in the fact that we have mentored young architects to become great architects on their own or with us. We push for longevity, but you get to a certain age and you just realize some people are more team oriented and other people are more individual. Mm-hmm. But I want to support them all. I want to invest in them all. And we take great pride in that.
Oh, that's great.
That's great.
Do you think that this kind of outlook, and this is a generalization, is somehow generational? That, I don't know, 40 years ago, whatever numbers of decades ago, less offices might have had your mindset? I would say that what you're describing is pretty unique, but also it seems to be that offices that are younger, quotes, because young means like 50 and under in architecture.
I've got you by 10 years there.
A wide bracket,
It probably is generational. I mean, one of the things that I was always stunned by, and I shouldn't be, but out of ignorance maybe, when I went to university and I was in studio, I was shocked by the competitive nature of the other students. Because I thought competition belonged in sports, not in the arts. And I'm sure, anyone watching this would kind of snicker because, of course, there's competition. I don't see it that way. Like, when we go in for RFPs and we interview and there's a firm coming out, we're going in, I congratulate them, I hug them, and I'm like, best of luck to you guys. And because we typically know all the firms in the Bay Area anyways,
right.
And they're our friends or they're associates, or if I don't know them that well, I wish them well. It's like you want the right fit. I think it's a very different mindset than, say, the East Coast. I think the East Coast is much more cutthroat, to be quite honest. But I've always been impressed by how many of our competitors have supported us and helped us throughout the years with questions about how you scale a firm, how do you run larger projects, how do you go after larger projects, because we're increasingly going larger and larger. And it's a family of firms that care about one another, and I think that's a much healthier environment to live in than feeling like you have to compete. I just don't think it breeds healthy ethos, personally.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with that. That's one reason why we have this show and put so much time into it, is to kind of help cultivate some of this community. And there's other reasons for that. It's for this kind of mentality, for me at least personally. One, what we all do is hard enough already. There's no need to keep tearing each other down. And two, I think, and maybe you would agree with this, that generally good architecture just needs to happen much more often. So if we can get more people to do it, then the mission is moving forward.
We're constantly handing projects off to firms that are smaller than us, even ones that we have already. We're handing off and saying, what do you need? We have enough. You need a ground up house now. You've earned it. Go for it. And if we can help you in any way, we will. And you're absolutely right. There's so much horrible architecture out there that the more projects we can spread around to architects who are really passionate and dignified and gracious, all the better. You raise the cultural bar of what is possible.
Yeah. Going back to the story. So you're at school, you graduate. What happens after you graduate? Did you practice at another office for a period of time, or what was the transition like?
I first took a year off and traveled all over the States and Canada and Mexico.
Oh, wow.
With a friend of mine in a minivan. And I wanted to see how other people live their daily lives. Instead of jumping right into architecture, I just wanted to, I worked as a chef, I sorted bolts, I worked as a, I did all these odd jobs while we were traveling.
Oh, that's cool.
And I just wanted to understand what other people, how they live and what struggles they have and what successes they experienced. And then I found San Francisco and dove in and first started to work with a furniture designer and architect because the tactile scale was something that I was very passionate about. So I worked for a one-man firm, Alan Fleming, wonderful man who mentored me in making furniture and in just running a small practice. And then I worked for a somewhat larger firm, but still small, Trachtenberg Architecture in the East Bay. And again, started to learn about developer work. And then after 7 years, Dave Darling and I, who I went to school with, decided to open up our own practice in our own studio.
Were there anything, particular moments or lessons learned that stood out from that 1 year journey when you traveled to different places?
And which one was your favorite?
Well, San Francisco, obviously.
Oh, yeah, obviously.
There is one thing that I learned about myself, and that is I am not good at repetitive tasks at all. And I look around the world and you look at all the people in manufacturing who are doing the same thing every day. And I don't know how they do it. And I feel incredibly blessed that I can, wake up and go into a studio and do something wildly different minute to minute and engage, anywhere from 5 to 60 people in a single day about completely different things. And all of it creative. That is a blessing that I would never have predicted I would run into. And then what is my favorite place? I mean, one of the most inspiring places was Zion Canyon in Utah. Just remarkable rock forms, like the sculpting that nature, that whoever, whether it's God or whomever, it's just remarkable. So inspiring.
Yeah, whoever did the plans for this one did a good job, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I also learned my love for the desert.
Oh yeah.
I did a lot of desert camping, and unfortunately, we finally 3 years ago we finished our first desert house.
Oh, cool.
Which was amazing. It was just a treat to finally work in that kind of climate.
There is something pretty magical about the desert. I remember the first time I came to the States and I did a Southwest road trip through the desert, and there's this feeling when you just can't see the end of the horizon and there is nothing around that makes you think really about, like, why am I on Earth? What is my existence about? Like it's a very...
Exactly.
I don't know. I almost wish that everybody could have that feeling once in their life, just to kind of, I guess, reassess the importance of what's around us on the day-to-day life.
That's a beautiful way of putting it. Yeah, it's an incredibly introspective landscape. Yeah.
That horizon.
It's just the horizon, the sun, and the earth.
That's a fantastic site. It's so pure. It's implanted.
But so was it difficult to build a house in this kind of landscape because it is somehow so pure and bare in some ways?
It wasn't as bare as one would imagine. We had the site is on a bluff looking over Coachella Valley in Palm Desert. And it was these incredible boulders, granite boulders, and pinyon trees, only 3 of them, but we didn't move a single boulder or tree. And we just kind of shoehorned this house within this plateau, looking out over this vast mountain ranges.
Oh, very cool.
So what seems conceptually really simple was actually incredibly dynamic, phenomenally dynamic. And one of the things that will come up is the fact that we typically camp on any one of our sites.
Oh, you do?
To start a project, whether it's urban, rural, or suburban. And the camping on that site was so pivotal to the creation of that home. But it was so dynamic.
Well, you say urban. So if let's say there is an empty lot in San Francisco, would you guys actually go there and camp for like a night or two? Really?
Yeah. Or if it's a remodel or a tear down,
right?
We camp in the house that's there. Yeah. And there's so much to understand about the microclimate in San Francisco, particularly. It changes from hillside to hillside and valley to valley. And there's so much to absorb about sound, about like the diurnal swing, how it affects the fog, the wind, all of these decisions that, because California has the capability of being kind of indoor-outdoor living, San Francisco is very unique in the sense that it's very cool, very windy, and you need to understand where your openings are, where your sun's coming in, where the shade, where the fog. It's actually quite dynamic site to site. So it's worth every minute on the site.
I think it's an interesting way to do a site analysis, rather than just looking at Google Maps and doing some trace sketches, like actually physically feeling the elements and observing what's happening.
Yeah. Well, we had this wonderful experience also in Soda Canyon up in Napa, where there was an existing bungalow. And we had the good fortune of going up during the weeks when my co-designer and we would be sitting at the dining room table, drawing and sketching, drinking coffee, eating our Danishes, whatever. And we'd look up and we'd trade ideas, and we could walk out to this tree and walk out to that tree. So it was like the most ergonomically comfortable camping we've ever done. But we were literally designing live time on the site.
That's cool.
It was a beautiful opportunity.
Do you get to camp out at the properties most of the time, or is that a rare occurrence? Like, how often does it take place? And do clients say, like, wait, what? Are you serious? Like
90% of the time.
Wow, that's amazing. That's amazing.
It's too valuable. It's too valuable to understand, what a site is like in the morning versus what the site is like in, full moon. It's too valuable.
And that would apply for a single family residence as well as any other type of project? Oh, that's cool.
Yeah. Even in our public work.
Wow.
Yeah.
It makes total sense, though. I suppose most people don't do it because they would just assume that it would be not feasible or the client wouldn't be on board. But there's absolutely no replacing being at a place, even for half an hour, like, oh, wow, this is like a lot. This is very informative. I can't imagine if you're there for entire day and entire night. That's just rich with stuff.
And it allows you to, so many of those early sketches are so directly informed. But I mean, if we could, we would design on the site on all of them. Mm-hmm. Just set up I've done this before where I've set up a whole drafting table in my car. So when it got really cold, I could just be designing and drafting. I used to do that. My son would be climbing in a rock climbing gym, and I would be designing in the car with my drafting table, and have drafting board can travel.
That's a great way to optimize
how
your
big
time.
of a drafting board are we talking about in that instance?
Usually a 42 by 30.
Whoa, that's big.
Wow.
Okay. I thought it was going to be like a 18 by 20.
No. You can fit a back seat in a minivan. Yeah.
You should customize cars for architects. That's impressive. Yeah. Okay, a legitimate one.
And it's actually incredibly ergonomic. Believe it or not, it's just on your lap. You've got all your coffee, your caffeine, and you just draw, and you got your trace, and you just sketch and draft, and it's great.
I completely understand the whole thing of being close to the site or onto the site, and it would, in addition to probably being exposed to a lot more ideas, as you mentioned, it's there's actually kind of probably an efficiency gain, because I feel like when you're distant from the site, so much time is spent trying to remember or to fill in the mental blanks. Are
you guys trained as architects?
Oh yeah,
we have a practice.
Both are, yeah.
Oh, I was wondering why your observations are so spot on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
We get
that. You should have said no.
I would have said you should go into architecture.
I might consider it.
Yeah. So you met David when you were in school at Cincinnati?
Yes.
And did you guys?
Although we were on opposite sections, so to speak. So when he was in school, I was typically, in a new city. And when he was in a new city, I was back at school. So we didn't really get to know each other until our senior year, when our thesis year, when we came together as an entire class.
Mm-hmm.
And we just hit it off immediately.
Did you guys get to do any projects together during that time?
No, because we were in thesis, so we were doing our own work.
Yep.
But we did, when we re-met in San Francisco, I had brought all my father's steel shop out to San Francisco after he had passed away. And we created a studio together just to make furniture and to do architectural competitions. And so we had a studio on the side of our day job.
Gotcha.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, that's how we started it.
And so what were some of the competitions you guys did?
Oh my God, there were European housing competitions. There was a memorial competition down in LA. A lot of them were just idea. They weren't build competitions, but idea competitions. But it's interesting. The reason I think, and Dave and I joke about this, that it has worked for so long is I've always described it as the rubber band theory, where there's certain people that critique your work, that take your idea and pull it forward, and you then pull it forward, and then he or she pull it forward, as opposed to pulling it sideways and off track. And Dave and I have always had a natural ability to pull our respective ideas forward. So it's a highly productive critique and really inspiring critique. Not that tangential ideas aren't great, but oftentimes the critic can be more focused on their own ego in a way of what they're trying to, or they have an agenda opposed to kind of fitting yourself into the other person's perspective and really giving insight to the idea.
That's a really good point. I like the rubber band kind of analogy or thought, and it's really great. I mean, it is amazing when you meet someone and you just naturally have that kind of buzz between the two of you. It's a great description, the rubber band. I never thought of it that way. So when did you guys decide to transition to your own office full time? You're doing competitions on the side at night, on the weekends, I assume. What happens after that kind of phase?
We were presented an opportunity to interview for a ground up home on the coast up in Timber Cove near Willits. And we won the project. And then I broke off first, and he had a number of great projects that he was running at his firm. And he's like, I can't break off now. But it took another year for him to then have because he wanted to, he had a great relationship with his boss, and he wanted to end, very respectfully in mind. I just happened to have an opening at that time. So he wanted to make sure that, you do it right. You don't leave anyone in the lurch. And so we just, we were 32 and we said, why not? Let's go for it.
That's really cool. It's amazing you guys met in school and then you traveled for a year and then you both ended up in San Francisco. It's a great story.
It was meant to be.
Yeah. Yeah. Cause, and I joke about our partnership is like a marriage. It really is. Like you have to, so as so many partnerships fail, both on the personal front, but also on the professional front. And I just remember the day that we committed, we said, we're going to do this. I felt like I had gotten married because, I would literally take a bullet for him, and likewise in reverse. And that was my standard, because I had been asked by a number of people, and my standard was, would I take a bullet for them? And I, without a doubt, would.
High standards, but I can understand it. It's things get kind of difficult at times. You need someone who is going to have your back, and vice versa. Yeah. Was and how has the partnership been over the years? Because your practice has evolved and certainly grown. You guys have done a whole bunch of projects of different scales and different types, and you briefly were mentioning that there's a little bit of a philosophical difference in approach. Versus you were saying like every project is a little bit more different, and he tries to find maybe more similarities between projects. Is there like co-designing happening between the two of you? How does that relationship work? Is one in charge of business, the other in charge of design or whatever? Yeah,
we have divided and conquered to a certain extent. Given like I'm probably leading 15 projects. He's probably leading 15 projects at any one time, which is a lot. And the way we do it is we set up, focus critiques, office-wide critiques, and then and literally the whole studio comes together, so we get to share ideas that way. And then everyone, once in a while we'll pull each other aside and say, what do you think of this? I'm battling with this issue. But our collaboration, one of the big difference is that we now have 4 partners in addition to us.
Oh, wow.
And they're amazing, amazing partners. And so that on the business side, I do more of the marketing. My partner does more of the financing. And then there's other roles that each of our partners play. And we could not be more blessed with people who are just salt of the earth, incredibly talented, incredibly smart, very passionate and loyal. And we're just a really tight family. And to have 6 partners running a 26-person firm seems top-heavy. Yeah. But it's working out quite well. And it just we just had an impromptu debate today on whether we pursue a certain type of project. And all 6 of us had very different perspectives. And we kind of, debated and crafted what the best strategy was. And it's so useful, so incredibly useful.
Are the different project types divvied up per person, more or less? Like, is one person kind of like the expert of this project type versus another?
Not between Dave and I, but more between our other partners. There's 2 that tend to be more interested in the residential side, and 2 that are more interested in the public side. And then Dave and I waft between both and all.
Is there a desire to grow beyond 26 people? Like how?
Great question.
How big are you planning to get?
Because you guys sound very busy.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have more work than we can handle. Fortunately, I feel very grateful for that. That is the question that we talk about as a whole design studio and as a partnership group all the time, which is how many is too many? Because it fractures our time on the project. And we're trying, we never thought we would be more than 25. And the question, there's different breaking points, between, 5 to 10, and then 10 to like 18, and then 18 to about 25, and then 25 to 35. And the personality of the studio changes when you grow.
Yeah.
And we've always had this ethos that we should be able to sit around a singular table and break bread. And we should know if someone's mother is sick, someone's child's sick, we need to take care of each other. And so that so far has not broken. We still can do both. But I think I would say anywhere near 30 would be the peak.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because then you really start getting these layers, which we're not interested in. We want to be more of a holism.
Mm-hmm. Or you need a giant ass table.
No, but that's
I think
true.
More than the table, it's about knowing about what each individual's personal struggles are on a day-to-day basis, and making sure that they're truly being cared for. I mean, I don't know how old you are, but we're at the age where pretty much the majority of our staff, the parents are at that starting to get that vulnerable age if they're not already there.
Mm-hmm.
And they're having kids, or their kids are mid-teens. And so there's a lot of quality of life issues that we're all getting hit with. And we're all swapping strategies of, how to care for our parents, and how do you, when they start to ail, and how do you toggle that with also raising a child while working, 40 to 55 hours a week. And that's something that we take very, very seriously as a team.
I mean, I think that's great from the work-life balance perspective, which is a conversation that needs to happen more in architecture, probably. But also, it kind of reminds me of what you were saying earlier of, I lost my train of thought, of everyone being trained as a leader in a certain way. Like you're building that really hardcore integration and that web, where the more in tune everyone is with everyone else, just the better you guys operate, even for the personal
Absolutely.
stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, believe it or not, I may look like I'm 20.
It's your hair, your hairstyle.
Yeah, but I'm actually 58.
No way.
Yeah.
What's your secret?
So my mom's genes. But when you get to this age, you start, you really start focusing on nurturing everyone around you.
Yeah.
And that's how we're starting to take more projects that are geared towards how do you raise your society around you? How do you take care of them? How do you nurture them? In addition to being able to explore intense design ideas, both in the private and the public sector, but you start to pivot a little.
I think it's interesting to think about like what you said, like the office size in conjunction to the quality of life that the people from the studio would have, right? And I think also ultimately within the office, just the feeling of being happy in the workplace and feeling fulfilled and satisfied, right? One of the office I worked at, I started and we were 35, and I left and we were 90, and it was not an overnight thing, but it happened fairly quickly. And as much as I love all the 90 people that were in the office, at some point, even within being just a member of the team, you kind of lose track of everybody's life, and you don't have the possibility in spending enough quality time with your coworkers, people, with 90 people.
Totally agree. Yeah. And that's, I don't don't know how you guys are surviving or survived the last 2 years. As far as, I don't know if you even have staff, but just the idea of working in the single studio together versus working remotely. That's been a big hurdle. We're incredibly efficient working remotely.
Yeah.
But spiritually, and I don't say that in a hokey way, but just like emotionally, people were suffering. And so I was continue. I've always been the push to get back in the studio to work together, to collaborate, and to joke, and to eat together, and to just really instantaneously brainstorm together. That's why I'm in architecture. If I'm just going to sit here by myself and create beautiful drawings, that's one thing, but I thrive on that collaboration. And you can tell people are happier when they have the chance to make together, I think.
So are you guys, what's your remote working policy then?
Great question. So Tuesdays and Thursdays, we're all in the studio together, and then they get to float the one more day. Dave and I are probably in 4 days a week. Mm-hmm. And then there's a couple others who they just love being in the studio. So they're there, 4 days. I would say no one's there 5. Mm-hmm. But it is interesting, I do appreciate, like I always joke with one of my principals, I can tell when she's written a document at home or in the studio.
Oh, really?
Because her written documents at home need 0 editing. And her documents that she wrote in the studio need editing. And it's because she's being peppered.
Yeah.
And her train of thought is being broken. Whereas at home, she can spend 2 hours uninterrupted and write it. Mm-hmm. So I do appreciate the value of uninterrupted thought. Mm-hmm. That's why my most potent design times often is like 4 p.m. till like 2 in the middle of the night, because the studio empties out. Or on a Saturday, I used to, before the pandemic, I would go in on Saturdays and just work all day. And you can go down multiple routes, connected, a tree of ideas that has many roots, but there's a very rigorous through line. Mm. But when you're getting interrupted every 20 minutes, you go back to where you started every time. You just keep going back and back. And so, genius doesn't come when you're interrupted that often. It just doesn't.
Well, it's like if you're reading a book, right? If you get interrupted every 2 sentences, you got to start the chapter over again.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Well, that makes sense.
Was some of this thinking, like these ideas you have about working with people, cultivating an office, even understanding the more intimate kind of mindset of having quiet space to work, was all of this somewhat always embedded within you throughout the life of the office, or were these things that came more to the forefront once your office started to grow? And I guess part of my perspective is, like, there are a lot of architects who are very good architects, but not necessarily good firm owners or firm leaders.
Yeah, great question. I would say none of it we knew at the beginning.
Sure.
We just didn't. I mean, I remember talking to Dave, right at the beginning, saying, how are we going to delegate any design work? We've been waiting to design ourselves for like all these years, like uninterrupted. Like, how are we going to let go of any of it? And it happened organically. And you begin to pivot to getting just as much enjoyment out of a really rigorous critique as you do about drawing it or making it yourself. That isn't to say we don't draw, we don't make models, because we do, Dave and I. But we never take the design and do it singularly. We always co-design with another designer. So they're designing parallel, and then we share and critique on every single project. That's how it works. And it might be a group, 3 people, but we're parallel designing. And then you get to a point where the design is developed enough that we go into critique mode each meeting. But the point is that had I known that at the beginning, absolutely not. Like, our instinctive evolution of our firm and how we treat our staff and how we want to challenge our staff is learning on the fly, all of it. But there's nothing to me more painful than wasting people's talent.
Mm.
Just kills me when someone's really bright and they're just drafting and just doing working drawings all the time. That's creative. It's a tremendously valuable and rigorous process, but they need to be able to do all parts of the process, follow a project all the way from start to finish.
Yeah, and there are a lot of really good offices out there. I mean, they produce good work, but also they have good office culture. They're good at helping their employees learn the different aspects, but also, because we get messages from our listeners all the time, there are a lot of really bad offices, and sometimes I forget. There are like a really bad, and these people message us like, I'm in this office, this is how much I'm being paid, this is what I do, should I move, should I quit? I'm like, I don't want to give you life advice, I don't know your situation, but yes, you, this is terrible, you should quit, what are you doing? You shouldn't be pigeonholed for 3 years doing the same menial task. It's not cool for no money.
It's just not, it's not worth it. No, people are too, and we benefit from the group collaboration. Like the designs get more and more rigorous they don't get watered down. I mean, one of the keys is, I will say, you have to hire talent.
Yeah.
And you have to hire talent with no ego.
Yeah.
And when you bring in talent with no ego, amazing things come out of that. Because typically those type of personalities are great collaborators. And I feel like our collaboration process makes our designs richer. And we probably represent 9 different countries, at least, in our studio. So you're getting all these different perspectives from around the world of just what life, how what are priorities in life, and how does that relate to design? That's the part I've gotten really. In the last 3 years, our studio has gotten much more international.
Is it easy to spot people with ego when you interview them? I mean, you would think it's obvious, and sometimes even in their design, I would assume.
Some offices are good at finding good people or filtering out the bad ones, and other ones are not good at that. It seems like maybe you guys are pretty good at finding the good people or not hiring the bad ones.
Yeah, we keep getting praised by our contractors. Like, where do you get these project architects? They're just like superhuman. And we're like, yep, they are. Well, part of, I think, the process is made easier by the fact that we typically have 2 of our principals interview, 2 to 3 of them interview before Dave and I interview.
Oh, okay.
So they kind of go through, and when they get through those 3, then we know that they're a good candidate. And then we do the final, like, make sure.
That makes sense again.
So,
yeah.
Again, the 5-6 principals they're seeing different things in that personality.
Yeah.
And some people will get, like, oh, they were just nervous, Did you see this part of it? Or,
right.
Or did you see that one project they showed that they like, that was brilliant, like.
And you're like, I wasn't so convinced about the project. But I like that, because one of the things that's always puzzled me from within this conversation is like when an office hires a designer of whatever level, like after a 30-minute interview, boom, you're hired. I'm like, that's cool. That's great for the person that got hired. But also, I mean, this is especially in a smaller size office, it always feels like a family. It's super dynamic. It's complicated. There's a lot of ins and outs. There's going to be pressures and bad times and good times. And you're just letting in some person you barely know. And I understand the portfolio is a way to read someone, but still, like a few more checkpoints would be nice.
And then if you select the wrong person, that existing studio would feel it right away. Like it would
resentment builds.
Yeah, it would be
absolutely. Yeah, we've turned down a lot of very, very talented people who we just didn't feel like they were the right fit.
Yeah.
Talking about the evolution of the office and maybe more about the work itself, one question I do like to ask is, was there one project in the past X number of decades where it was the first, let's say, kind of like turning point for the office in your mind? Or maybe it was a project that you felt, this actually is like expressing our ideas. This is starting to feel something special to us.
It's funny. I would think that would be a hard question to answer, and actually it's very easy. surprisingly. The project that we designed at Stanford University, it's the Windover Contemplative Center, hits all of those points. It's a 4,000 square foot structure that integrates gardens and a forest all seamlessly. So it's a non-denominational spiritual retreat for people to go for mindfulness practices, whether it's yoga, whether it's meditation, contemplation. And it was designed around a series of 30-foot long massive diptychs by paintings by Nathan Oliveira, a revered painter who taught at Stanford University. And in combination with him, his family, and a donor, they wanted to create kind of an oasis on campus where, I mean, Stanford gets students from all over the world.
Yeah.
And the one church on campus was not going to serve them when they needed a place of respite, spiritual respite. And so they wanted to create this non-denominational space, this environment, to regain their center, because it's a tremendously stressful campus. The competition is immense. There was suicide, just like the just increase in our daily lives with the computer, of worldwide stresses on the students in addition to their studies. It's intense. And the commission is a full body sensorial experience where we were able to design we lecture on designing for all the senses and not just the visual. And so it allowed us to deploy all these various strategies regarding tactility, acoustics, smell, touch, and the visual. And we're combining art, nature, and architecture all in one gesture. It was a dream project, complete dream project, but it allowed us to stretch out all of our interests in so many ways. So that would have been the pivot point for our studio.
It sounds like a pretty unique project to be able to design. Yeah. Right?
Yeah, the brief was amazing.
It is amazing. So I guess, and maybe you kind of answered it, but one question people might have is, how do you design a space like that is not meant for any one particular religion? Do you go back to the roots of just the different senses?
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's about how to create, the biggest challenge was how to create space that an individual can occupy and a group can occupy without bothering one another. Because it is a silent space. When you walk in, you can't talk.
I see.
And it's amazing that the students actually, without, there's a small sign up front that says no talking, but they actually do follow, that guideline. And that was the biggest challenge, because it had to do with how you set up, your view cone to an art piece, a view cone to nature. How do you integrate water, sound in a space? How do you create an environment which is live enough that people will feel uncomfortable talking, but soft enough? Because if you create a highly deadened space, people will talk and they'll try to talk louder. But if it's loud, if it has enough resonance, they'll actually kind of be embarrassed to talk loud or talk at all. Because they can sense that they're bothering the person over there. So there was a beautiful just study of how to create communal space and individual space where one can reflect comfortably and safely. How do the women come in the middle of the night and feel safe in that environment as well, both inside and out? So it was a lot of taking advantage of the opportunity to design to the psychology of the individual and the collective.
Oh, that's fantastic. It's a great project. We'll put the link in the notes for people listening.
Was that building open during COVID? I'm just... or did they have to?
I don't think so, because I think the whole school was closed down.
Oh yeah, probably. The whole campus was shut down.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a phenomenal project. It's like it's kind of like an ideal project. It's a project you would get like if you're a third year student.
I know.
You know, and then you never get that in real life.
As your own thesis project.
Yeah. That's great. Talking about the design process, I guess maybe your personal design process and how you work, and then also the studios, kind of studio wide. Do you yourself still do a lot of hand sketching and things physically with the pencil or pen and model making?
Yeah, it was kind of devastating having this rotator cuff surgery, because I told the doctor, I'm like, I can sketch, right? He's like, yeah. And then I showed him, like, with a gesture of my arm, like, I can draft, right? He's like, absolutely not. Because and it turns out I can draft. Like, I'm doing it anyway. But to your point, I remember my freshman year in college, I brought one of my projects home to my father to critique, because he was a professor in both industrial design and sculpture. And he would give me amazing critiques. And I started to explain my project and saying, this is my process. And I yabbered on for a while and then explained the project. And he listened quietly and he nodded his head and he said, Josh, the day that you can say this is your process or this is my process is the day you hang it up. And his point is, you should always be uncovering your process throughout your design life. And so I will say each project is absolutely individually unique. And I aggressively try to come with a blank slate. And so I will say typically there are some common threads. So there's the camping on the site, there's the sketching on the site, there's the coming back to the studio with the project architect. And we encourage them to study in any medium that they feel comfortable, whether it's watercolor, whether it's bas relief, whether it's clay, whether it's in the wood shop, because we have a wood shop. Whatever feels natural to this specific project, dive in. So there's sometimes where I start with a series of bas reliefs. Sometimes I will start with charcoal sketches. Sometimes I will start with little drafting of spaces and drawing little perspectives. So I really try not to be predeterministic about that early stage, but it is intoxicating at those first weeks of a project where you're trying to, and we talk a lot about how architecture that we're creating is not additive, it's extractive. So if you really listen to the site, and you really listen to the client, not literally what they're saying, but what they're saying in the blue notes between what they're saying. And you marry those two mediums, the client's thoughts, the site's thoughts, then there's the cultural, and then you can start to extrapolate into what you feel like are salient ideas that are critical to the process. Then I try to describe this. I don't know if you ever played Kerplunk.
I don't think I ever have.
The game Kerplunk. Well, imagine sheets of paper floating in the air. And you take a needle, long needle, and you thread an idea through one sheet, two sheet, and then it stops. Take another needle, you go through three sheets. The ideas that stand up are the ideas that thread all different layers of sheets. Site, client, culture, structural, climate, all these different, the layers, the strata. If you can find those pins or needles that go all the way through and touch each one, that's a valid idea. And we talk a lot in the studio about how every gesture should have 5 reasons for being. And if it doesn't, it's not critical enough, which is a high standard for every gesture.
Yeah.
But what you're trying to do is get down to the bone. You're trying to let the fat kind of melt off and slowly find the most critical, like how does that one wall or that one opening or that one material solve 5 problems? Psychologically, emotionally, physically, and so that process of extracting this concept and this structure, and I say structure not meaning literal structure, but the construct of the idea. That first couple weeks is just fascinating. And one thing I've also learned that it took me probably 10 years running the firm, 12 years, before I realized that the concept of a building doesn't have to start at the beginning. It can be uncovered halfway through your design process. And in school, you're never taught that. You're taught, you start with a concept and then the building unfolds after that. But I've had some incredible buildings where the concept really gelled halfway through when enough constraints started to surface and enough solutions started to surface. And then all of a sudden it really kind of locked in and gelled, which is, I know it's kind of abstract to talk about, but it was very empowering to realize.
It makes total sense. I there's a lot to unpack with what you said, and I appreciate all of it. The paper kind of visual is very, very helpful. I think what's key and interesting with that is, like, folks, younger designers, let's say, who are listening to this, should understand that it's not about just addressing each of the sheets of paper separately, each of the different issues separately. It's at finding the needle that works as a continuous thread. That's the really tricky thing. That's what, exactly as you said, that's when it's a robust and good idea. When it's an idea, it's not like just a crapshoot of 50 things, and somehow that idea addresses half a dozen whatever we're talking about. That's money, but that's difficult to it's difficult to find. It's difficult to find.
It is. And but it's all, like, another little lesson my father taught me was, he said, when you're stuck, the last place you should look is within. Your answers are all out there in front of you. Just start looking, not just looking, but seeing. And there's a big difference between looking and seeing, but really, like, let the information come in and gather it and hone it, but the answers are all right in front of you, which I thought was really helpful.
Yeah, that's a great outlook.
Yeah, that's a great outlook. And I think that's also where sometimes, like, designers get hung up on that concept at the beginning, right? Like, you're right, you kind of have to test those ideas and push them far enough that you can see if they're robust and if they reveal anything. It's very difficult to try and create and finding the solution right then. Like, it takes work and tweaking them around and bouncing them against the wall and try something else, right? That's also why it's very dangerous for people to think that there is so in the more typical, like, professional sense, there are phases you go through throughout a project, right? Concept design, SDDD, but like in the just design we're talking about, it's a flaw when people think that there's a step-by-step thing. And when you hit these gates and you think you have to be perfect at each of those steps, like, there's no way. Who were we talking to recently? And they were commenting that at so-and-so university, that the students get graded at the end of each of those steps. So, in school, you're typically taught, and for some good reason too, like, you start with site plan or bubble diagrams, and then you move to this and da-da-da-da-da, right? And they're given a grade at every one of those steps. And I'm like, that's fucking mental. Like, you can't do that. Like, you got to give yourself some room here, to breathe. It's not a math equation, right? Right. Yeah, architecture is so nonlinear. And there's a tendency to want to make it linear. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know why that is. Out of security, because it's too...
Well, and it's a service you provide to people who do not understand what architecture is, right? So, I mean, how do you explain to clients, well, we have to go back 3 steps behind because we actually just uncover something awesome, you know? They'll be like, are you out of your mind?
Yeah, there's typically a linear equation to paying someone for product and progress.
Yeah.
And it's not linear. It just isn't. You know? Not if you're paying attention.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you can force a linear process, but if you're really seeking something more powerful emotionally and more soulfully, I mean, like, one of the things I always talk about is like, how do you extract the soul of a building? And it's about listening and seeing, really absorbing, I think.
Yeah. You know, your guys' website is also really kind of cool because there's a section on there, I forget where on it, but it says, we believe, and then it says in whatever it is, and there's like a list of half a dozen things. And what's really nice talking to you today, as we would have expected, is that, you know, the things that are said on the website for people can look it up, it's not, how do I say this? It's not marketing bullshit. You know what I mean? Like, you know, sometimes you read designers' websites, you're like, all right, like, you're just saying this because it's what you're supposed to say. But what you're expressing is very, very honest. And one of them, I think, is something about like taking time, something of that effect. Like, we believe in taking time and not just plowing through stuff.
Yeah. I can't remember the exact quote that my partner came up with. I have to give him credit, Dave. It's not about expediency. It's about everlasting endurance or something.
Yeah.
And that you have to respect that great ideas and solutions. And that's where listening to clients, listening to the engineers, listening to studio members, fabricators, if you keep your ears open and you act respectfully to all of the players, it's amazing how the buy-in can bring, you know, ingenious solutions, whether they're macro or they're micro. You know, I always talk about, like, if your client's a doctor or a surgeon, they have immense knowledge about how things go together and connect. And, you know, like, why would you not want to open that door of incredible knowledge and embrace it and include it in the solution of creating, whether it's a commercial or institutional or residential project? They're brilliant people. And, you know, much smarter than I am in so many ways. You know, it's like, why wouldn't you open that door and have them help brainstorm with you about opportunities for problem solving? And that's when it gets really fun. We talk about when a design gets evolved enough that when you're in a presentation and the clients are throwing out suggestions or for whatever reason, they can almost answer their question, because the building starts designing itself. And when all the participants can see how, like, I joke that, you know, you don't want to put a tiger's leg on an elephant's body.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Yeah.
Because there's every animal is perfectly designed to work as efficiently and economically and beautifully and in motion and in stasis. But you can't just keep adding odd animal parts to that animal, or it won't function. And the same with the building. So at a certain point, that I love it when the client sees a suggestion and turns it down because it's not consistent with the design.
Yeah.
It's like, yes, you know, they've gotten it. We've coached them to the point where they can self-critique or critique others' work, and so it's just not consistent.
You see the light, yes. We've created one more person to champion good design.
And they're so smart that it doesn't take them that long to get it. You know, it's like, it's just coaching them to be confident, part of it. So many people aren't confident in their, like, oh, I can't draw, I can't paint, I can't sculpt, whatever. It's like, no, but you've got great ideas and they're completely valid.
And the thing you mentioned about sticking a tiger's leg onto an elephant and the why that doesn't work, I feel like also ties directly back into what you were saying earlier with the architect's role almost being this person who, I forget how you phrase it, but like reveals what's there within the client, within the site, and et cetera. And there's this kind of thing of the project is what it wants to be and needs to be at a certain point. Like when it gets to a certain point, it's floating on its own. And you just kind of have to honor the path it's going and not screw with it.
Yeah, exactly. Very beautifully said. Yeah.
So
you can quote me on that, what you just said.
That'll be in quotes. It'll be by you. It's fine. Is there an ideal client or a certain type of client, maybe not like the one, but clientele that is more ideal for you guys? Do they have to be open to things? Do they have to be... I don't know. What is...
it's taken me 25 years, but I actually have an answer to that.
Oh, wow.
Let's hear it.
It's very simple. A great client is someone who has very clear ideas about what they're trying to achieve without telling you how to do it.
Yeah.
They understand that you are the expert, and if they're going to pay you the money they're paying you, just like you'd pay the doctor or the lawyer, whatever, and they're not changing their mind all the time, and they're not ambiguous about what they're trying to achieve, but they give you full authorship to take them from 0 to 100, all in their interest.
Mm-hmm.
And it takes a very confident client who has hired someone they really trust.
Mm-hmm.
And they're confident in the sense that they know what they want without being specific.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
They're not going to tell you, I think you should move this room over here because of this or this, or this scale is wrong. Or it's about the client who is saying, I want to achieve a space that you can do X and Y.
Mm-hmm.
And these are the activities that are really important to me to be able to accomplish. How can we accomplish those, and what kind of spaces would that result in?
Mm-hmm. That's great. That is going to be a quote, because it's a question that obviously we think about pretty often, but I don't think I've ever heard it put quite so concisely. And the things you're describing of what the client wants, it's not, I mean, you said it. It's not like, oh, I want it to be blue, it needs to be here, this is the dimension. It's more like, I want it to feel this way, I want it to... these are the activities, like the more
elusive.
Yeah, kind of elusive. I don't know how to describe it, but those kinds of things.
Mm-hmm. And that's why in our programming documents at the beginning of the project, we asked them all kinds of bizarre questions that have nothing to do with architecture.
Mm-hmm.
Uh-huh.
Because we want them to start thinking much more broadly about what we're going to be talking about and what inspires them. It's so important for us to get inside the client's mind about what excites them, inspires them about life and what they've lived currently and how they want to live in the future or work in the future.
So do you try to filter out the clients that would come and be like, this is what I want? Or do you wait until you get into the programming, questionnaire list and try and guide their answer to show them that actually that's not how they should think about it, and hopefully change their mind?
Their mindset?
Their mindset in a way?
Great question. I think the hardest thing, any architect will tell you this. We all think of ourselves as, really brilliant, psychologists who understand people and can weed out the productive collaborations from the less productive, but it's really hard.
Yeah.
We've had clients who I was curious, like, is this going to work? And they turned out to be dream clients.
Mm-hmm.
They just needed a little guidance to open up the door. And have other clients who, it was like, okay, this is going to be, this is going to be great. And they ended up being just gripping too much,
Uh-huh.
And I wish we could be more adept at predicting that.
It's hard because I feel like it's almost you have to project test them, right? You have to make them through it once so you can actually see who they truly are, because that's really what it comes down to in the end, right?
Yeah, get your crystal ball out.
And it's a two-way dynamic. I mean, you start down this path, and it's like you're getting married, you know?
Yeah.
And you're dating at the beginning, but you're already married. You already signed the wedding certificate, and you're dating, and that dating, there's a dynamic that begins to build between the your team and them, and so often it can be so beautiful, but occasionally it can be stressful.
Yeah.
And a lot of it comes from trust. A lot of it's about communication methods. Some people are very precise in communication. Other people are more opaque or more vague. And so trying to marry those kind of styles of communication within the studio and within the client coming in, you know, it evolves very organically, you know.
Yeah, and
which is beautiful. Yeah,
it's interesting because you really get to know the people you're working with. In this case, we're talking about the clients super well. And a part of the job, to a degree, is to learn, like in a relationship, learn how to communicate effectively with that person. Not everyone communicates the same way. I guess via text versus email versus phone, but also just you know, the reading the blue notes you said, I think, like reading between the lines, like it's different for every person, what that means.
It absolutely. There's certain clients that I only communicate via phone call or face-to-face, and others it's effortless on email and text, and, you know, it's totally individual. You know, I appreciate that. And you need to be adept enough to begin to read their comfort levels.
You had mentioned that during the programming phase, you guys have a bunch of odd questions you would ask a client, or questions they might not expect. What are some of those questions that you would ask that would maybe for a client to be like, why are you asking me this?
The most unexpected one?
I don't know if I want to give away the secret sauce.
It's your favorite animal.
Yeah, I'm going to hold that one.
Oh, good answer. Yeah. Well, then, sort of in a similar way, do you ever get people who approach you and say, here's my Pinterest board, I want something that looks like this? And how do you deal with...
That's a challenge. I think Pinterest has been a very, has not done architects any good service.
Yeah.
I think people are hunting Pinterest way too much, and it's cutting into the creative process for architects. Even architects are hunting Pinterest, you know?
Yeah.
And I think it's a dangerous game there. And we go through waves of not wanting to show any precedence at any point in the process because, yes, it can be a great communication tool, but it's also can be very prescriptive and limiting for really exploring new architecture, I think.
I mean, I think
I'm very wary of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think even if you were using your own project as a reference, right? Like, you don't necessarily want to keep doing the same thing over and over. If it's yours or if it's somebody else, the point is to create something new, right?
Absolutely.
So at the earlier phases of the design process, are like the deliverables you would show a client, do you keep things much more vague and sketchy and conceptual, I guess you could say?
Yeah, we try to keep it more open-ended, sorry. To not be too prescriptive too early. That's not always possible. And it's interesting because I've become weary of myself because I can design very quickly. I've become a faster and faster designer, and I need to remind myself to slow down. And I don't know if anyone else in my studio feels that way, but I definitely feel that way. Like, I feel like I can smell it pretty quickly, what, like when you walk into a field and you smell the earth, or you smell a glass of wine, you can smell certain notes. I feel like I've gotten very quick at smelling where I feel like the direction of the process can go, and I need to slow down.
Interesting.
Is the concern that when it feels like it comes so quickly and naturally that you're starting to have that repetitive process, or something like your dad had said, where you're just you're not questioning enough, I guess?
Yeah, part of that, and that, are we unearthing enough? Are we turning over enough stones to get to something that's really really soulful? Yeah. Or
you've become enlightened.
And that's why I love the collaborative process, because it does force different perspectives just inherently into the design process, which is fantastic. There was a designer who unfortunately moved to a city up north, state up north, and he and I, you could give us any problem and we would end up on opposite ends of the spectrum as far as what our perspective is. And at the beginning, when he was young, it would drive me nuts. He'd be like, "Oh my God," he's like coming in from left field again. And after a few years, and he's really talented designer, I realized I counted on him to be my foil.
Yeah, challenge you a little bit.
Yeah, quite a bit. And I would be like, okay, what's he going to come up? Like, get excited. Like, what wild perspective is he going to see that I just would never have come up with?
Yeah, yeah.
And it was sad when he left, because I started counting on his foil. Yeah. One thing that's really important is that, when we delegate design, we do not want anyone thinking like, I'm designing in the vein of Josh or Dave or Aidlin Darling. Like that's to me, that's death. They need to be designing honestly and openly as them, seeing opportunities, seeing the problem statement, just directly, and expressing themselves as they would, because that's when we're going to get great, a collage of ideas that will be meaningful, that we can then sort through.
Do you guys work with physical models quite a bit across the office?
Absolutely, yes.
And are these models, and in most cases these days, I feel like that would typically mean a 3D printed model, which comes from a digital model. But maybe that's the case for you guys.
No, we oftentimes our source is, well, again, we have the benefit of a wood shop, so we can combine kind of chipboard, wood, a little bit of metal, clay, paper. Like Dave is famous for making these, what we call sketch models, where he'll take a wrinkled up paper bag, cut it up, put it through the Xerox machine so the typography is printed on the paper bag. And he'll sculpt the paper bag roughly to the contour. So it's super abstract, but it's close-ish. And he'll start inserting these conjectures of what this building could be. And they're like sketches. And he just will make a series of them. Whereas I typically will start more like with a bas-relief, truly abstract ideas. And then slowly filter in, okay, what is it we're trying to...
Do you show those process models to clients?
Yeah.
You do?
Yeah. Some people get them, some people don't.
Yeah.
Sure. I think it's really cool though, because there are a few things that are I feel like they're dying in terms of the different tools being used. Certainly, it's like hand sketching is dying, and then drafting with a main line is dying, and physical model making by hand and the way you're describing is dying. And it's kind of is, we can guess why, but one reason is that it would seem like it just takes too long, right? Like it's faster if I just do it in the computer. It's faster if I do X, Y, and Z. Faster if I hit 3D print instead of bothering to cut with an X-Acto and using tape. Like it's slow to do that.
You raise a great point, which is what is, I have this obsession with this idea of the artist, the maker, the designer, their drawing implement, or it could be a computer. And it's the idea of people are seeking the adjustability, quick ability to adjust. Mm. So it used to be trace, where you would sketch something and then you would overlay and modify and overlay and modify. And the beauty of the computer is that you can quickly, depending on the program you're using, adjust and adjust. Mm-hmm. So it's not like you have to remake the whole drawing again. Mm-hmm. It's retractable. It's elastic. Mm-hmm. And there's a beauty to finding the magic elastic medium where you can test, retract, adjust, test, retract. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
And everyone has their own comfort zone of what that medium is. Because your brain is working faster than your hands ever can. So I'm obsessed with this idea that like artists oftentimes, because the idea that you have to commit and deal with what you have and then just respond. There's incredible artists who, painters and sculptors, like you make that gesture and you got to stick to it. Now you got to just respond to it. You can't go backwards. The wood has already been cut or the paint's already on the paper. Mm-hmm. But architects and designers are always like wanting to like test and come back.
Mm-hmm. I know.
And like tweak and tweak and tweak. But as fast as our brains can think.
Right.
So for me, trace still is incredibly effective for that. You're not plugging away. You're physically kind of sculpting the architecture with your hand and your lead, mm-hmm. whether it's drafting or sketching or mm-hmm. a pen. Mm-hmm. You're feeling it. And I've always been a little weary of like plugging in constraints. And I don't know. I mean, everyone has their own fascination with how they want to make.
Yeah. I like the fact that you said much earlier in the conversation that the design process used by different people in the office, it's up to them. Like you have access to these tools, mm-hmm. whatever you feel is the best for you, then, you can do that. But the conversation of whether if you're hand sketching and the value of it or hand drafting, even at the extreme versus doing things in the computer comes up very often. And obviously everyone's moving more and more, younger generations are moving more and more toward just the computer. And if that's what's going to happen, it's what's going to happen. But I think it is worthwhile, maybe from an educator's perspective, to think of, okay, what are the implications of that though? What is getting lost? Because there is this thing where when you almost have too much freedom and flexibility to go back and forth infinitely, you like sometimes for myself at least, I find it difficult to make progress. Like I need the medium to be physical so I can be like, well, that's a line, I got to deal with it now. Something about it forces progress in a sense.
There's responsibility, makes you accountable and responsible for the choices that you make.
Yeah.
But I think also, for students or younger generation, those skills and tools are disappearing from the toolbox. But they don't have to, it's not because you don't have a class that you're taking in school that you have to give up on hand sketching or modeling with clay. Like you could still go to the store and get it yourself and just play around. And if that's what works for you, then it's what it is. You're still going to have to work on the computer probably, but you know.
Well, I always ask people, okay, if you were, particularly people who have traveled around the world, if you were to pick the top 10 most emotional environments, man-made environments that you've ever experienced, Were they made by a computer?
Yeah. Yeah.
Not that I'm against computers. I think they're a great tool. We've done some things that we could never have done had we not had a computer. But ultimately, what is the goal? What are we doing all this for? It's to create, to inspire, people inside with the environments we create. That's the most important for me. Regardless of the tool.
Right.
Yeah.
Do you guys think that the design phases of the entire process are longer for you than other offices? That's a tough question to answer because who knows what other offices do. You know what I mean? But I'm just thinking again, because like the physical model making and these camping on the site, just a lot of the things we've talked about are atypical in a good way. And I'm just thinking, I guess maybe people might be listening thinking, I don't have time to do these kinds of things,
That's a great question. And I have to say, visiting other offices where like they're given is 3 feet with a computer. The next person is 3 feet, completely, flat desk, no access to model making, no access to drafting, no access to we hired a woman recently and we give them a lot of room to work. So they've got a computer area and then they have a whole table and then a rolling table next to them.
Wow.
They have a lot of real estate. Both her tables were empty and she was sketching right in her sketchbook, right next to her keypad. And I was like, oh my God, this is what she's used to doing in her last job. That's all she had real estate wise. And fortunately, she's also very excited to work in the wood shop. So it's not like she won't be expanding her horizons at all. But what was the question again?
I don't know. I was just wondering if you felt like the design processes take longer in your office, but
where I was getting at was yes, I think they do for good reason, but it's not belabored, and we're constantly engaging the client, so they can see at a very rigorous rhythm the evolution, and they're so involved in it that we've never been questioned in that early stage in schematic design, like this is taking too long, because they're seeing the evolution, they're part of it. And but my point is, like when I go to other offices who are in that kind of cubicle setting or 3-foot module, I can see how they could just bang out projects so quickly. They're already instantly laying out structural grids and, core, it's like I could see the linear process just unfolding so quickly.
Yeah.
So the Lego set is building itself, right?
Yeah.
And I think it's one of the things that's really difficult. I don't know why we keep talking about students, but
because of you.
Yeah, because of me. But the transition
it's important
from school to practice is one of the things. The shocks that can take place is in school. You are free most of the time, at least when we were in school, to do whatever you want, right?
Right.
If your presentation it involves, I don't know, tearing up twigs, and you feel that's truthful and it is good, then that's what it is. But you work at a corporate office on the East Coast, no, you have your tiny moleskin at best, right? Maybe you have trace, you have like a ballpoint pen, what are you going to do with that? And you have your computer with one monitor. And it's really, from a creative perspective, it's really difficult for, I think, people who are used to having freedom to go into that and trying to be productive, innovative, interested in that mode of working. It's
depressing.
Yeah, it is. I totally agree with you, and that's why we typically hire designers who are passionate about physically making. So we're already biasing, the studio environment because their portfolio is filled. Like you just tell people, There's certain students who geek out in the wood shop or geek out in, making amazing like renderings that aren't just computer renderings, but they're collages and they're, embossed and debossed. They're three-dimensional. Like you can quickly read into someone like their happy place.
Mm-hmm.
And we definitely seek out those people who thrive in exploring architecture more physically.
I wish I'd been in San Francisco instead of in New York, putzing around with those offices.
Are you going to quit your job?
Not that I would have gotten in, but still. I also want to talk about the diversity of work you guys do, because you do a lot of different types of projects. Was one question is, was that always the intention to do different types of things? And do you, I presume, get joy from doing types of things? Is it productive and helpful for them?
Absolutely. We always, when we go, we take our office on retreats all around the country, sorry. And kind of in remote kind of camping situations. And a lot of what we talk about is the beauty of taking on program types that we've never done. Because we're learning so much. We can't get into this like, well, we did this on this last project. And so you start kind of regurgitating what you've done before. We're constantly going after work projects that we have no experience at. And the point is that our pitch is that you're getting fresh, hungry ideas about people who are really listening to you. Whether you're a collegiate institution or you're a restaurant or you're a commercial venture, we're listening aggressively to every word and goal you have with the experience of living and building a lot. But we're going to be creating solutions that are very unique to your problem statement. And that's where we thrive, is just, continually embracing the unknown, which is really exciting. It keeps us fresh, and it keeps all our designers fresh. And fortunately, people trust us. Like they keep hiring us to do projects we've never done before, project types that we've never done before.
Do you think that's because, obviously there's a proven track record of great projects. That's like one thing, right? Do you think you're being approached and continue to get jobs like that because once they meet you and they talk to you guys, they realize, okay, this is going to work? Is that the turning point?
I think they realize that there's an ethos that we do bring to the table, which is not synthetic at all.
Mm-hmm.
That is very organic, that is very modern, but is based on human emotion. And you can apply that to any project type. And we talk a lot about how we extract that from the user, the end user, so that it lives effortlessly, but it breathes and lives with great emotion, in a wellness kind of natural sense. If that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
And people, there's think of all the stress. Like the world's a shit show right now. I mean, it is.
Yeah.
It really is. And who wants more chaotic living than they're already handling right now? And so we're being asked to create, again, I feel like I'm repeating myself, but kind of nurturing, soulful environment.
Mm-hmm.
Just to be able to go on with every day.
Mm-hmm.
And that's very rewarding, to be able to create these, whether they're residential or, commercial, whatever they are. We did just recently, one of the biggest compliments I've received in a long time is we were hired by Google to be the anti-Apple.
Okay.
And how do you create retail that has tooth, that has organic feel to it, that has grit, that has life? It's not a synthetic machine.
Mm-hmm.
We just finished a store for Google in Williamsburg, and my sister, who lives in Brooklyn, visited it and just sat there for like half an hour and just watched people. And the store had been open for like 5 months, or like she just happened to finally go. And her report back was so rewarding because she talked about how it didn't feel.
Oh yeah.
And it didn't feel like a retail store. It didn't feel like, it felt organic. It felt human. It felt all these things. It was like, it was so rewarding to hear that from an unbiased, because she didn't know what the goal was.
Mm-hmm.
And they're about to finish in the next number of months a pretty intense. I can't wait for you guys to go down to the Google headquarters, the Heatherwick headquarters, because the big retail store there we designed.
Oh, cool.
And it's going to be like something you've never seen before. And it was such an inspiring collaboration with their head of design, Ivy Ross, in creating this soulful environment. And for the sale of technology.
Yeah.
Which is
just very smart.
Kind of. Yeah. Well, and it's the basis of their product lines. They're trying to be the anti-Apple. So.
Right.
But that's a great, like that's a fork in the road that we would never thought we would be designing for. To complement, a winery or a high school for 100% Latino immigrant population, or whatever.
One quick question with the different types of projects, because it's come up recently a lot in the show, is do you find it's difficult to be hired for different types of projects when you haven't done those? Because we hear increasingly, especially for public works, that a lot of times the RFQ says, okay, you can apply to this project, but show me the 5 libraries you've done. It's always 5. Have you guys come across this, and have you had to partner with other offices to, use their portfolio to show that you've done 5 collectively?
Sadly, the answer is yes. Yeah. We are facing that, and you're absolutely right. It gets more difficult the larger the RFP, because they get more conservative with their ability to say, yeah, let's test out this firm who's won over 275 awards, but has never done this 5 times.
Mm-hmm.
So you're absolutely right. It's a challenge. But all it takes is one. And that door opens and then that door opens. Because we're right now, I don't know if you're aware, we're in the middle of construction on that 60,000 square foot contemplative science center at UVA.
Oh, cool.
Probably. Yeah, I might know of that project.
It's the first one in the country. The rigorous scientific study of meditation and contemplation on the human body, and rolls out over all 11 schools at UVA. But they took a gamble on us.
Mm-hmm.
We happen to have the most expertise in a way for the Windover project at Stanford, but we were up against the big guns who had done one institutional building, one campus building after another, and we had one.
Wow. But it was a good one, though.
Well, yeah, sure. If it wasn't done that. I mean, I hope that more and more institutions and clients essentially understand the value of giving obviously very reputable offices an opportunity, and the value that it brings them and everyone else and people that use the building, etc.
Well, but that's the thing, right? Because if you hire the same people to do those types of building over and over, they will never kind of question things the same way and get them to evolve and change, right?
Absolutely. That's yours. Yeah, you're preaching to the choir. Yeah, that's it. I mean, I have to give Mark Cavaniero credit because he has been pushing the young firms and coaching the young firms on how to thrive, because his perspective is that the good smaller firms are all being bought up by the conglomerates.
Yeah.
And those, once you have 5 smaller firms who have all done a certain number of projects, the mid-sized firms will never be able to win another commission.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I really commend him for aggressively trying to counteract that and encouraging small firms' success. And don't sell out. Don't sell the big firms.
It's something that the being bought out by another office or big conglomerate is something we hear more and more, even for mid-size offices, which happens, but somehow you don't think about, like 65-person offices.
And worldwide too.
Yeah. It's
which is a scary trend, I think.
Yeah, because then you just get, you start to just, you might as well just plug in Pinterest and get your building.
Yeah.
And have an AI just generate a random building,
This is another topic.
I know.
I know we're right at the limit here. A last question for me, which I always ask, is what is your favorite building that is not your own creation?
Bourderonnet Cemetery. Bourderonnet Cemetery by Carlos Scarpa.
Oh.
I think that's a pretty iconic one, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a combination of a Japanese garden and an Italian crypt in the middle of cornfields in a small town in Italy. And I camped there overnight in the cemetery after my father's passing.
Wow.
And it was incredibly moving, stunning place, morning, noon, and night. And I took my wife and my son there 30 years later. And it was amazing to see how they responded to that same building. I would tell every architectural student to make a pilgrimage there. It combines incredible craft, beautiful indoor and outdoor space making, and just an incredible sense of place, remarkable sense of place.
It's fantastic. Scarpa is one of the individuals that I think is obviously well respected, but a little bit underrated.
Oh, yeah.
Like he doesn't get the credit I think he needs and deserves.
Although it seems like every year there's a new book on his work that comes out.
That's true.
I'm baffled how many books can come out on Carlos Scarpa every year. It's like he only built, a certain number of buildings and another book comes out. Like, kind of fascinating.
Joshua, this was phenomenal. Thank you so much for making the time to be on the show on this Friday afternoon. We really appreciate it. The conversation was great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you both. And I'd love to meet you in line. We'll have to go out to dinner sometime. I'm very curious about your practice.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for watching this video on YouTube. If you like what we're doing, then please support our show by hitting that subscribe button and liking and commenting on our videos.
You can also find us on most of the social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. We're mostly on Instagram. And you can reach out to the hotline, 213-222-6950. You can send a text message or leave a voicemail. If you have any reaction to this recording, any questions you might have, or guest suggestion, feel free to send it our way.
Cool. Thank you for watching and see you next week.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye-bye.